My solo exhibition's title is Despite All My Rage. I would say the title primarily comes from wanting my work to be very much about the fact that I'm 25 years old. The work that I do is very much a reflection of the fact that I am this age at this time in history. And part of that is making a bunch of different references to the 90s, honestly. Making work that's of the now, but also speaking to what I grew up on. A lot of what I do within my work is focusing on prey animals, really, and placing them within these scenes that kind of evoke the Renaissance sometimes. And a lot of what I do is I try to bring this big like theatricality to a small moment that probably wouldn't be seen by humans. An example being that deer running around in the ocean. I'm interested in the idea of like, yeah, things that people would never see, but also profoundly reflect the human world at the same time. Like the big concept that I was thinking about within this work, which is called Wild Animals Don't Die of Old Age, is the idea that humans are kind of afforded the privilege of living out their days peacefully. And with this work, I wanted to be kind of in your face about the imagery I was using, the idea of like weaponry things coming at you all the time. And the idea that as a person, sometimes I do feel that way, like things are closing in on me. So yeah, the vase motif I've been working with for the past couple of years, really. My very first iteration of working with vases and painting was this piece that was about the memorialized past. I was making work that had a lot to do with COVID and the idea that life was just going to be that like current present for the rest of forever, really. And I was thinking about times even 2 years ago when things felt so normal, but really things weren't actually that different. But I was, yeah, thinking about the idea of like vessels, especially like vessels as a motif in like historic Greek work. And this, yeah, the idea of the memorial. And then I started getting into, I mean, some of the more recent vases that I've been painting have a little bit more to do with like more delicate narratives, talking about the idea of living a life where you kind of have to be a fighter, but you don't want to be. Like the vase painting with the two rabbits and the axes. Those two axes are actually like mountaineering axes. I like the idea of using imagery that kind of is evocative of weaponry, but it's really like a utilitarian object, and like kind of the delicacy there. So, well, I've been one of the biggest repeating images within this body of work is stuff that kind of evokes the Renaissance, but also kind of evokes quilting, barn quilts. And I'm interested in this idea, I guess, of combining like the complex heraldry of like altarpieces and things like that, things of the Northern Renaissance, with like things that remind me of home. I guess what I think a lot about in my work is the idea of comfort. As someone who like moved away from a place that I knew for 24 years and I moved 1,000 miles away, and I'm trying to figure out how that works and how to feel like a regular person in a very, very different world from what I'm used to. So I'm pulling a lot from like images of like quilts that I have from my family and things like that. That's kind of a small reference, but my work always comes from an idea before an image. I might sometimes have an image in mind as I'm developing a concept, but mostly I kind of know, like, for example, I want to make a painting about like humans' fragile relationship with dying. And like, how do I communicate this? And that's kind of me as someone with an illustration background too. I'm just very interested in starting with what the goal is. And sometimes that also means as I'm planning out a painting, I have to scratch something because it's not serving the narrative. And that's one of the like biggest decision-making things that I do. And a lot of that comes very early in the process. And a lot of the time too with my paintings, I'm planning them start to finish before I even touch the panel with any paint. So yeah, it's interesting to see these two next to each other. I never really imagined them together at first. But I like that they kind of both combine like the magical and the volatile, and they do that in different ways. Where I don't know, like that's something that I'm really interested in my work is like towing that line between something that's like beautiful and kind of gross. That's something that appears, I would say, actually a lot in the work that I do that's more like botanically themed. I'm interested in like exaggerating parts of the form that kind of make it look creaturey. And there's something I love about, like reflecting like the grotesque crossed with like the sublime beauty of it at the same time. This painting that's right behind me, it came from just all sorts of different studies that I was doing of flowers that were mutated. I was interested in like researching the idea of how do like mutations in plants happen. Like, is it based on like environmental concerns, or is it something that just naturally happened? And I think about the idea of anomalies, where like, the whole thing came to be like when I was thinking about like my place in the world as a queer person, thinking about like was that an accident or is that just like something that naturally occurs in the world? And it's, so really the way that I think about this work is pretty sad, to be honest. And it's one of the more complex paintings within this body of work. So as far as these ink drawings go, they're much more from the world of strict observation. And I have been interested in, I guess, the idea of curating a show that very much has different tones to it when you look at it through different parts of the gallery. And that is kind of where this started. But then I really got involved, honestly, with like how sublime it can be to just like render things that came out of my everyday life more so than like having these heavily illustrated things that were really planned. I like making work also that is a little bit less contrived and just kind of happens. And I guess a lot of that specific, I mean, all of those drawings really are like kind of on a base level there to reflect like my appreciation for my daily life. I would say like moving out west and like seeing what I see every single day is extremely crazy. It is so beautiful, and I think a lot of like this work that I make that's kind of like revelatory towards like wildflowers out west comes from a place of like wanting the preservation of it when I'm afraid that that things might fall apart as the world gets overdeveloped more and more. But I guess those are all like primarily, except for one, like ruminations on like the natural world within like the place where I'm currently living. So people are always asking me, is it the moon, is it the sun? I don't really know or care. I think it can be either or both. I'm interested in, I mean, the way that you started alluding to it, like the idea of this foreboding presence. I like the idea that it suggests space in some of these images that otherwise have an unclear sense of like how far they go back. So I think a lot of the time what it's there for is to like suggest a greater context. The idea that like these moments that you're looking at don't exist within a vacuum. There's something broader, there's a world within it. So I'm kind of a weird person and I raised moths last summer. And I mean, the reference imagery came directly from that little time in my life. And I developed this obsession with these little creatures that take like 6 weeks to become a cocoon. And then once they hatch as a moth, they live for like a week and then they die. And I got really interested in the idea of self-preservation. Like the armored hand, I added that in there as like a suggestion to this, like humans' obsession with like aging, getting old, their lives changing, and things being, I mean, just the idea that like our limited time on Earth is not enough. Meanwhile, these moths live, you know, 7 to 10 days. So I'm interested in those parallels and the idea also of purpose too. When I first moved out to Colorado and I, you know, was living in this place that gets like sunlight, actual bright, good sunlight every single day. And like you wake up every morning and like you hear magpies and it's just like an amazing place. When I first moved out there, I was like, wait, I'm not depressed anymore. I don't know how to paint anymore. Like so much of what I do comes from like fundamentally being sad and angry. That is like my area of comfort as a person, but also within my paintings. And luckily my life got hard and I started getting depressed again and I started making good paintings. But that was a rough time for like 2 months when I first moved out there. It was just like too pretty and too idyllic for me in certain ways. A lot of what I do in terms of my work is like striking the balance between danger and fate and luck and fortune. Just kind of the unknown, I guess, the future. And yeah, to me, a lot of my work, and this includes like my colors as well, I want to like suggest that there's some possible like optimism or good outlooks, but you don't actually really know, and that's the scary part. That's a lot of what I really do, is kind of ruminate on not knowing within the world.